All right, guys, welcome back to Ancient Amnesia Podcast. This is Josh, your host, and we are coming back with a quick clip show. It's been a while since we've done this, and we hope you guys have been well. Please go to our YouTube Shorts. We are starting a new project, which is really exciting. It's crystal hunting, and I've had some property for some time that is very unique. It's located on the escarpment zone in central Texas, and it's where some ancient fault lines lifted up some ancient seabed. I happen to have on my region of land um, where the seabed was fracturing, and a lot of old exposed rock is there. So you can see all kinds of ancient fossils, geodes, also some volcanic rock from somewhere around 35 million years ago when there was volcanoes in the region. Very interesting stuff. And there's very rare Texas celestite forming there as well. You normally see Texas celestite in Madagascar if you go to crystal shops. So check out the shorts. They're going to be pretty saturated. I'm probably going to be focusing on those shorts for quite some time. There's other things I'm doing with that. But I do want to pepper in some of this stuff too, because I think this is kind of the heart of the show. This is where I started, and I want to continue reading interesting things, whether it be science, archaeology, anthropology, even philosophy and psychology, and get some more guests on and just kind of continue the work. So we do have our website coming back up soon. We had a complication with the host, and I'm going to have to repopulate a lot of information. So just give me some time on that. Appreciate your patience. Otherwise, go to Ancient Amnesia on Facebook, and please subscribe. We have about 60,000 people there, and I load content daily there as well. So thanks again. All right. So one of the things that we did see recently on the news feeds, and we shared it to the Facebook page, was something that actually I've been saying for quite some time. And you may hear this in science, but since they sequenced the genome, the human genome, if y'all remember back in the early 2000s, I think it was 2000, 2001, there was the Human Genome Project, and they finally mapped everything. And of course, all the scientists in science and mainstream science at the time said, "Oh, this is going to be, the one-shot wonder, right? This is what's going to determine all of our destiny, all of our fate, genetic diseases, everything down to IQ, our intelligence, everything's mapped in the genome." To me, it seemed like, this is a little bit too all-encompassing. I think that I've always believed that the environment and your lifestyle has everything to do with the way that your genes do adapt. And as early as 2000, I say 13, maybe even a little before that, there were some science articles and science, places that were kind of questioning the genome at that time and saying that, yeah, there's something called epigenetics, and that has to do with how the organism is adapting into its environment. So I wanted to highlight with a couple articles just kind of this information and show that they are definitely moving towards the direction that the genome is actually not as powerful, as important as we might think, and that our environment is actually, where we want to focus in terms of how we make these radical changes to our health, our life, our intelligence, and even as we pass things on to our children in the future. So Science Daily, this article was written in December 19th, 2019. So just a few years ago. And it says, in most cases, your genes have less than 5% to do with your risk of developing a particular disease. According to new research by University of Alberta scientists in the latest meta-analysis ever conducted, the largest meta-analysis ever conducted, scientists have examined 2 decades of data from studies that examine the relationships between common gene mutations, also known as single nucleotide polymorphisms, in different diseases and conditions. And the results show that the links between most human diseases and genetics are shaky at best. Simply put, DNA is not your destiny, and S&Ps are duds for disease prediction, said David Wishart, professor of University of Alberta's Department of Biological Sciences. The vast majority of diseases, including many cancers, diabetes, and Alzheimer's disease, have a genetic contribution of 5 to 10% at best. And you hear this all the time, right? Well, you need to get scanned because my dad had brain cancer or mom had Alzheimer's, so I have a high risk. And I in my personal life, I am a health coach, and I work with a lot of doctors, nurses, and clinicians, and they say this all the time, that it's all the genes, and I laugh and say, okay, cool. Well, then I can just eat McDonald's 3 times a day and not worry about anything, because if I'm genetically predisposed to not get diseases, then it doesn't matter what I feed myself. I just find it very ridiculous. I even had one person tell me that heart disease, is all genetic, and it didn't matter, whether you ate horrible or not. You're either going to get it or not based on your genes. So again, these are professionals. These are people that we're relying on to give us answers. And so, it's really important we better understand this, and pivot our own personal lives so that we can, do the right thing to contribute to our longevity. The study also highlights some notable exceptions, including Crohn's disease, celiac disease, and macular degeneration, which do have a genetic contribution of approximately 40 to 50%. Despite these rare exceptions, it's becoming increasingly clear that the risk for getting most diseases arise from your metabolism, your environment, your lifestyle, or exposure to various kinds of nutrients, chemicals, bacteria, or viruses. Weishart and his research collaborators suggest that measuring metabolites, chemicals, proteins, or the microbiome provides a much more accurate measure of human disease risk, and are also more accurate for diagnosis. The findings fly in the face of many modern gene testing businesses models, which suggest that gene testing can accurately predict someone's risk for disease. The bottom line is that if you want to have an accurate measure of your health, your propensity for disease, or what you can do about it, it's better to measure your metabolites, your microbiomes, and your proteins, not your genes. And the research also highlights that the need to understand our environment and the safety and quality of our food, air, and water, which we all know in the Western countries, especially America, is horrible. And I believe that a lot of these problems are coming from our actual environment and our diet, our food sources, the plastics and toxins that are in our foods, not including the petrochemicals and all kinds of different environmental toxins that we take in daily, and most of us that are unaware. So that was Science Daily. Now, another article by nature.com. This one just came off the shelf on the 5th of February, 2024. It's time to admit that genes are not the blueprint for life. The view of biology often presented to the public is oversimplified and out of date. Scientists must set the record straight, argues a new book. How Life Works, a user's guide to the new biology by Philip Ball Pan Macmillan. This guy wrote this book, and this is a little overview of kind of what he's saying there. For too long, scientists have been content in espousing the lazy metaphor of living systems operating simply like machines, says science writer Philip Ball. Yet it is important to be open about the complexity of biology, including what we don't know, because public understanding affects policy, healthcare, and trust in science. So long as we insist that cells are computers and genes are their code, life might as well be sprinkled with invisible magic. But reality is far more interesting and wonderful, as he explains in this must-read book. When the human genome was sequenced in 2001, many thought that it would prove to be an instruction manual for life. But the genome turned out to be no blueprint. In fact, most genes don't even have a preset function that can be determined from their DNA sequence. Instead, genes' activity, whether they are exposed or not, for instance, or the length of protein that they encode, depends on a myriad of external factors, from the diet to the environment in which the organism develops. And each trait can be influenced by many genes. For example, mutations in almost 300 genes have been identified as indicating a risk that person will develop schizophrenia. It is therefore a huge oversimplification, notes Ball, to say that genes cause this trait or that disease. The reality is that organisms are extremely robust, and a particular function can be often performed even when key genes are removed. For instance, although the HCN4 gene encodes a protein that acts as the heart's primary pacemaker, the heart retains its rhythm even when the gene is mutated. Another metaphor that Ball criticizes is that of a protein, with a fixed shaped binding to its target being similar to how a key fits into a lock. Many proteins, he points out, have disordered domains, sections whose shape is not fixed but changes constantly. The fuzziness and imprecision is not a sloppy design, but is an essential feature of protein interaction. Being disordered makes proteins versatile communicators. They're able to respond rapidly to changes in the cell, binding to different partners and transmitting different signals depending on the circumstance. For example, the protein aconitase or aconitase can switch from metabolizing sugar to promoting iron intake to red blood cells when iron is scarce. Almost 70% of protein domains might be disordered. Classic views of evolution should be also questioned. Evolution is often regarded as a slow affair of letting random mutations change one amino acid for another and seeing what effect it produces. But in fact, proteins are typically made up of several sections called modules that are reshuffling, duplicating, and tinkering with those modules is a common way to produce a useful new protein. Um, and then in the book, he grapples with the philosophical question of what makes an organism alive. Agency, the ability of an organism to bring about the change to itself or its environment to achieve a certain goal. And that is the central focus of this book. Agency, he argues, is attributable to whole organisms, not just their genomes. Genes, proteins, processes such as evolution don't have goals, but a person certainly does. So too do plants and bacteria. Excuse me. On more simple levels, a bacterium might avoid some stimuli and be drawn to others. For instance, dethroning the genome in this way contests the current standard thinking about biology. And I think that such a challenge is sorely needed. He is not alone in calling for this drastic rethink of how scientists discuss biology. There's been a flurry of publications in this vein in the past year, written by me and others, all outlining the reasons why we need to redefine what genes do. They all highlight the physiological processes by which organisms control their genomes. And they all argue that agency and purpose are definitive characteristics of life and have been overlooked in conventional gene centric views of biology. The burst of activity represents a frustrated thought that it is time to become impatient with the old view. Genetics alone cannot help us to understand and treat many of the diseases that cause the biggest healthcare burdens, such as schizophrenia or cardiovascular diseases and cancer. These conditions are physiological at their core. The author points out, despite having genetic components, they are nonetheless caused by cellular processes going awry. These holistic processes are what we must understand if we are to find cures. Ultimately, we are at the beginning of a profound rethinking of how life works. And in his view, beginning is the key word here. Scientists must take care not to substitute an old set of dogmas with a new one. It is time to stop pretending that, give or take a few bits and pieces, we know how life works. Instead, we must let our ideas evolve as more discoveries are made in the coming decades. Sitting in uncertainty while working to make those discoveries will be biology's great task for the 21st century. And so, yes, we are definitely looking at new paradigms. And it's good to see these fractures in the old paradigms and these new ideas coming to surface. Of course, those of us that are into this stuff and studying, we have this intuitive sense that a lot of this stuff is true. And science, should be built on a healthy distrust of its own self. And this has kind of been blanketed by a lot of, I would say, propaganda within the field to subscribe these scientists that are, pushing certain agendas and certain ideas for whatever purposes. But there is a saying that the new paradigms are born with the death of old, professors and old collegiate and the intelligentsia. As it dies, new things and ideas come forth. So we hope this stimulated your mind. We will be back with more stuff like this. Please leave us a comment and let us know what you think about this information. Please, again, go to Ancient Amnesia on YouTube and subscribe and share, and go to our shorts where we're working on a new project where we're in the field digging up amazing stuff, fossils and ancient history from the Cretaceous era and beyond. So we hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.